Good evening and welcome. I trust you're all well during these unusual times. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Dryden. I'm a 95J promotion member and currently chairing the UK Finance Alumni Group, and I will be your moderator for tonight's talk. Format of which will be a short introduction from myself, followed by presentation from our speaker, Quinton, and then we'll get the opportunity to have some questions. For those of you who want to put some questions in, please do. There is the widget at the bottom of your screen, hopefully, where you can add questions. So please add them as you go along, and we'll hopefully come up to them at the end. Great. So tonight's talk, INSEAD and the alumni groups, especially of late, have been working hard to create events to support the members, and we're focusing very much on the key goals of INSEAD being a force for good. So with both those goals very firmly in mind, I'm exceedingly pleased to be that our topic tonight is child financial education and how we as parents and carers can develop and transfer that vital knowledge to our children. Even before the onset of COVID, the financial literacy of children was a life skill that had been, to a large extent, left behind. Fortunately, a charity called City Pay It Forward has, through the tireless work of its founder and members, been making great strides to correct that in the UK through creating materials for schools and now parents to help with the financial education of kids. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome the founder of City Pay It Forward, Quinton Nason. Quinton by day is the head of capital markets and corporate development at Tetragon, but in his spare time puts on his educational Caped Crusader role and has been able to imagine, complete and distribute a complete children's financial syllabus across the UK. So Quinton, congratulations on the fantastic work you and City and Pay It Forward have achieved. For our group, would you be able to give some highlights of charity and some of the milestones you achieved so far before we move into the presentation?
Sure. Well, hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm talking to you from Camp Lockdown in Miami. You know, I live in London, but we have also a house here, so I decided to come to London or to Miami to get some sunshine, given that we haven't seen the sunshine in a long time in London. By background, I'm a Wharton graduate in '94. I did the Wharton MBA, the Lauder MBA, and MA program. My wife, who I met at Wharton, also is a Wharton graduate, and my daughter now is at University of Pennsylvania. And I know that Wharton and INSEAD share a lot of common. We do a lot of events together, so it's great to, again, collaborate with INSEAD. In terms of background, I'm a banker. Started my career at UBS in 1994, New York, Hong Kong, Singapore, and London. Been in London now 22 years, so despite being here for many, many years, the US accent doesn't go away. I'm a father of two. And that's important because, you know, I think we learn a lot about financial literacy as parents. I've been in the world of finance for over 25 years, and I started City Pay It Forward 4 years ago, really with the intention of having the opportunity to make an impact in my community. Because I was seeing through my children and through the schools that I'm involved in that actually financial literacy doesn't feature very prominently, if at all, in schools. And so I determined that, you know, this was my opportunity, together with some other colleagues in the financial world, to do something. And a little kernel came into my head, and I said, well, why don't we create some financial materials for primary schools? And what was just an idea became a reality. And 4 years ago, in fact, at the beginning of this year, we published a book. So this is a book that we published. It's a textbook. It's aimed primarily for primary school kids, primarily for year 6, but it's applicable for many other year groups. And together with sponsorship and Rising Stars, a leading educational publisher, we sent it to every primary school in the UK for free. So for people who have children in primary school, one of the ways that you can help us is going and talking to your primary school and say, did you get the book? Would you like to use it? Is there ways that we can collaborate? So it's been an exciting journey. And today what I thought I would do is I would walk you through the presentation that we give in schools, just so you have a sense for the approach that we take. Also, I will give you some insights into questions that children ask. We've now given the presentation to over 15,000 children at 150 schools across the country and counting. And it's been eye-opening because I think that very often as parents and financial professionals, we think we have a good finger on the pulse of what kids are asking, but I've certainly found a lot of things that have surprised me, in some respect, shocked me. So before we begin, I'm going to ask Katie if we can put up a poll. And the poll is simply, do you think that financial literacy should form a core element of education today? So Katie, you want to put that up and take, let's say 30 seconds, people. It's a little bit of a softball, I know, but I think I just want to use it as a basis for discussion. Hopefully everybody's cracked the polling on Zoom. I'm not the best on the technical side, but I see it's going. Okay, so as you would expect, 100% of us would expect that financial literacy would form part of the curriculum at schools. And what's amazing is it doesn't. In fact, financial literacy within secondary is subsumed within the subject of citizenship. And so if you pull a citizenship book for that subject, it'll be 120 pages and 10 of it will be broadly around financial literacy. And in fact, in primary schools, there's nothing. And in fact, Cambridge did a study that said children by the age of 14 establish behavior patterns around the subject of money. So behavior by 14, but attitudes towards money are established by the age of 7. So that means that early year intervention is absolutely critical because children, which in essence at year 2, are already developing attitudes towards money. So if we do interventions at year 6, actually that's a few years too late. So let me here, I'm going to try to share the presentation. So once again, this is a presentation that we give at schools, and let me run through it. And one of the things that's very, very important for me is that we stop and take a look at money. Because actually banknotes from around the world are incredibly cool little visions of different countries and different cultures. And as we move towards a cashless society, children less and less have interaction with money. Because if you think about when we were growing up, one of the things, if our parents sent us to the corner shop, we'd have some coins in our pocket. And when we wanted to buy something, we'd reach into our pocket, we'd get the coins, we'd pay, we'd take the change, we'd count the change, and off we go. And our actions were limited by the coins in the pocket. But in fact, in today's society, and I think accelerated because of Corona, we are moving very fast to a cashless society. And that means that kids don't reach into their pockets. And that means that they develop a very abstract relationship with money. And so what we always start our presentation is just taking a look at money. What does it look like, And we do a little fun thing saying, this took a look at a new £5 banknote, something that we've all seen and looked at very often. And we ask a question, how many fives, whether the letter 5, the number 5 or the word 5 appear on a £5 banknote? So it's a little bit of an Easter egg hunt. So I'll stop here for a few seconds, take a look at this £5 banknote and see how many 5s you find. And by the way, kids love this. So it's quite a neat little story. So the answer is many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 that's hidden. But in fact, if you look under the picture of the portrait of the Queen, you'll actually see the word 5, the number 5, I don't know, 100 times. So you need a very strong magnifying glass. But the reason I put this up is because I want kids to get the sensation or to understand, to hear something that they touch and look at a lot, yet they really don't know it. And I want them to take a look at money before they spend it, some action to stop them from going, I want to having it, to actually having it. And then we took a look at the back of the £5 banknote. And, here's a picture of Winston Churchill, all about his life. Interesting little factoid. If you look at Big Ben, you'll see that it's at 3 o'clock, which is the time that he gave his blood, toils, tears, and sweat speech in the Houses of Parliament. You see he won the Nobel Prize for Literature. So that's a little, you'll see it in the background. So it's all about history. And in fact, there was an artist that put a picture of Harry Kane on 6 banknotes and put them into circulation. And supposedly, if you find them, they're worth £50,000. And the same person put Jane Austen right next to Big Ben, and those are worth £20,000. And I think now all 6 of 6 have been found. But once again, I tell kids, hey, look at the £5 banknote and see if you have a dot there, and you could be 50,000 pounds richer. By the way, this artist also is known for doing an engraving of the Queen on the head of a pin. So this is an individual who has a lot of time on his hands. But what's really exciting is the fact that banknotes are changing, and we're living in phenomenally exciting times because our money is becoming plastic. So over time, banknotes have changed from Elizabeth Fry to now plastic Winston Churchill, Jane Austen, Turner that's now in circulation, and the £50 banknote featuring Alan Turing is now going to come, I think, next year. But you might be interested to note that 30 countries around the world also have plastic money. And it's a very secure money. It's cheap. It lasts a long time. So from government's point of view, it's very good. And, we emphasize that, banknotes over time change. So it's a little bit of a history lesson. So we go back, Charles Darwin was in it, Charles Dickens, and then Florence Nightingale. And in schools, we say, well, who is Florence Nightingale? So we interweave, which is very important, the concept of other subjects that are statutory, like history, geography, math. We weave these into financial literacy to make them more relevant. By the way, they did a study, and of 1,400 banknotes from around the world, you might be interested to know some little factoids. The color green is the most prevalent color of any banknote, followed by yellow and gray and blue. Occupants of banknotes, the highest by far is politicians. I guess they're the ones who figure out, royalty, writers, military, and scientists. Animals feature obviously heavily in banknotes. You'll be happy to know that birds are 4 times more likely to feature on banknotes from around the world, followed by horse, elephant, and fish, which are all tied. And carrying up the rear are cattle, giraffe, and turtles. Lastly, structures that appear on banknotes are castles, monuments, offices, churches, and bridges. But I emphasize banknotes because I just worry that we're going towards a cashless society, and I want kids to engage with money in an exciting world. And here we talk about banknotes and the fact that, way back, not so long ago, in fact, banknotes barely feature anything, and a banknote is simply trust that the person giving you, what they're giving you, what you get is actually the same and is valued the same. Look at the 10, 20 pound banknotes over time. You might be interested to know that even William Shakespeare appeared in a banknote in the 70s. Maybe some of you guys remember that when that happened. But it's not in the world of banknotes. It's also coins. I don't know if I'm sure you've seen the new £1 coin. It's meant to be the most secure coin in the world. And in fact, the old coins, 1 in every 30 were supposedly counterfeit. And I think if you go and look for some old coins, under the sofa, you actually see that they're pretty ratty and tatty. So, but once again, it's very exciting to be able to engage kids with these things in terms of money. Things in terms of banknotes and the fact that the Bank of England goes and removes old banknotes from circulation. In fact, you'll also be interested to know that Corona had a very big impact on banknotes, so much so that in South Korea, I think it was in April, removed all physical banknotes from circulation and quarantined them for 2 weeks. Because actually, banknotes are carrier pathogen. And one of the things that people are worried about is the coronavirus is being on the paper, and given it passes a lot of people's hands, the worrisome bit is actually plastic is much more carrying pathogens than old paper. Then we say, hey, let's take a step back. What are these things? Well, they're actually old forms of money, Chinese money, coins, silver ingots, copper ingots. And on the bottom right-hand side are shells. And I ask the children, are shells money? And of course, I get all sorts of responses. And then I said, well, wouldn't it be interesting to know that in fact, the island of Manhattan was bought in 1626 for $24 in seashells. So for all of us who are in real estate, that was the deal of the century. How about buying that plot of land, 24 bucks? That is a trillion bagger. So, but once again, connecting it to history, making it relevant. Talk a little bit about barter. And then we ask an existential question. And, maybe ask a question to your kids. You're going to get some interesting responses. And that is whether money is a good thing or a bad thing in society. Because actually, a lot of people have different views on money. And money gets, ascribed as something, a qualitative value that it doesn't get. And then we say, okay, well, what about in a world with no money? How would you pay for things? Well, actually, you'd probably barter. And we explore the concept of going for a haircut. And if there was no money, would you take a chicken or some cattle? Isn't it better just to take banknotes, coins? It's just a utility value, because the reality is money is not a good thing or bad thing. It's how we use it. But then we take the flip side. What if we were all millionaires? And we look at some banknotes from around the world. We all know that these obviously are essentially defunct currencies that suffer from inflation. And then we look at banknotes once again from around the world. And then we go into Germany after World War I, and we dabble into the concept of hyperinflation. When money doesn't have value, we talk about this individual having a wheelbarrow money post World War I, and that wheelbarrow money barely bought him a loaf of bread. So we interject that as a concept. And then we look at my favorite banknotes. $100 trillion bank of Zimbabwe banknote. And at this point, all the kids go, wow, isn't that amazing? And I ask the kids, how many digits are in 100 trillion? They start to count them. I say, how many zeros? Teachers love it because they can start to weave in the concept of math and large numbers. I bought this I gave this to my son one day, and he went to school and he was a trillionaire and he had a lot of friends. I'm sure he didn't like the fact that I bought this on eBay for £3.50, and I know I was ripped off. But once again, one of the ideas you might want to consider for your kids is there's a ton of banknotes from around the world on eBay, and you can get them cheap and cheerful, and they make really exciting things to look at, to chat. Then we start to talk about what things cost, because the reality is kids have no idea what things cost, and especially don't understand the concept of relative values. So I asked them, what does a Twix cost? What does a ratty iPhone 7 cost? This is a very interesting. I'll then ask them, what is the cost that a family of 4 spends on groceries on average in the UK for 30 days? So I'll give you a moment I'll pause there for a second. In your mind, what does a family of 4 in the entire UK on average spend for 4 people? Well, the answer, I don't know if you can see it, is £500. So here we come across our first trade-off. So here a child can make the choice of a ratty old iPhone, which costs the better part of £500, or use that exact money to feed a family for 30 days. And it's these kind of things, these trade-offs that I try to weave in, which are very, very powerful, because kids don't have that relative. And then we ask them how much a car costs, and then we ask them how much a house costs, and we completely lose them. They have absolutely no idea. Talk to them, if you have 20 pounds, what would you spend it on? Trying to encourage them to save, to put money into the bank. And then we ask them, well, what does a bank do? Obviously a bank, saves your money, but it also lends to money. We start to talk about the concept of lending money for mortgage and for university and different things along the way. What we also find very interesting is many teachers we talk to also have no idea what banks do. So in some respects, not only are we educating the children, but we're also educating the teachers as we go along. Talk about the concept of interest. It's very hard talking about interest in negative interest rate environments, because, if you live in Amsterdam, you're actually paying to have a retail savings account. In fact, they're talking about the death of compound interest because of negative interest rates. But anyways, let's hope for better times. Michael, can you see me okay? Okay, is it still okay? Okay.
Yep.
So then we interject, what if you got paid for doing nothing, and is there such a thing? And we say, yes, there is. The only thing we can think about is putting your money in the bank account, sitting in the hammock, and every year you get paid by the bank. So the idea that savings is very, very powerful and doesn't require a lot of effort. We interject the concept of compound interest, because as finance professionals, to the extent anybody's in the world of finance, that compound interest is a very powerful tool in society. And while we don't want to get them into compound, we just simply want to, it's the concept of put your money, keep it there. The longer you keep it, the more it becomes over time. And in fact, there was a very interesting study done by a finance professor, Wharton, that says if you put $1 in a bank account, essentially in a bond, what would it be its value 200 years later? And the reality is $1 would be almost $2,000 because of the compounding effect, versus if you bought a bar of gold, it'd be worth $4.52. So, you know, putting money in the bank, especially if you do $1 a week, $2 a week, or pounds, whatever, it really, the compound effect is quite powerful. And the idea of start saving earlier. The earlier you start, the more the compounding effect, the more that will be valuable. And in fact, even at the age of 10, you can start to save for things like a house in the future. So saving is very important. And then we ask quite a powerful question, which I didn't think originally was that strong. We say to the children, remember 15,000 kids, mostly 11-year-olds, all demographics, all economic levels. Is your money safe in the bank? So now, Katie, may I ask you to do the second poll? So if you could take a look, and I want you, what do you think the answer to that question is? What percentage of children in the class say that their money is safe in the bank? So take a guess, and then I'll tell you. I'll be very curious to see what you guys think. Also, this is a test to make sure that I'm not, since I can't see you, hopefully I'm not boring you to tears. Okay, well, why don't we use that a little bit of a proxy, which is amazing because it's equally spread out. So I'm not sure if this is your view of the banking system or children, but the answer we have found is between 50% and 80% of children do not believe their money is safe in the bank. So just think about that for a second. 50 to 80% of the children do not believe their money is safe in the bank. And the trust is a fundamental element that underpins our financial system. So when we go to kids and we say, hey, put your money, opens up a savings account and put your money in the bank, but they don't trust it. And it's not because of the financial crisis or PPI mis-selling. It's the reality is they never go to the bank. They never interact. Their only interaction with the bank is a virtual one. Okay. Apologies for that, my friends. So once again, to the bank. So one of the things that we try to leave them with is the fact that your money is very safe in the bank. So we reinforce that. Doesn't matter whether it goes bankrupt, gets hit by a sinkhole, lightning, gets hacked, your money is safe. So much so that in fact, is effectively insured by the UK government as to £85. Once again, a fact that many teachers don't know. So once again, teaching them. Talk to them about savings, need versus want. We make it very playful, need versus want. We start to interject the concept of branding and whether something, you should pay that much money for branding. But it is situation dependent, obviously, because if you live in the countryside, a car is important because you might need it for groceries, but in the city, it gets square wheels. But this is a very powerful one. So we ask them, a Starbucks Frappuccino, something that my son really enjoys. You look at that, is that a need versus want? And they generally say that's a want. But then we look at this individual, this homeless person who has a cup. And so this is very powerful because we say need versus want. And assessing what is one versus another is situation dependent, and it depends on, and so we try to say it's not always so often, so we'll give you a rule. And the rule is a 24-hour rule. And it basically says wait 24 hours between deciding that you want something and actually purchasing it. Once again, interject an action between doing something and buying something, because more and more that action is not visible, especially with Amazon one-click and in-app purchases. We re-emphasize trade-offs. That's something I would encourage you to do because you can't have both. You have one or the other. That's important. And the concept of brands, because I think that this society is inundated with all sorts of social media pressures, and children are being encouraged to spend more money than they should because of logos. Research, more and more children are now buying things on the internet, so encouraging them to research, consider buying used, good things for the environment, maybe consider buying things on eBay, obviously with appropriate supervision. But one of the things that we also find in schools is schools are very focused, and so are our children, around corporate responsibility and the environment and climate change. But the reality is, one of the most powerful things available for consumers in terms of affecting change, I don't think is actually rioting in the streets, but is in fact the power of the wallet. And so creating situations where you as a consumer can do the right thing by buying from the right companies who are good stewards of the environment is a very powerful thing. And this is a way to start to have your children engaged in financial literacy, but also weaving it into concepts that they see. The idea of looking at ratings, making budgets, and then assessing what things cost. So, this is basically trying to compare the concept of the cost of doing a budget and then saving and then buying that versus buying it now, whether it's through the bank, a credit card, or a payday loan. Because obviously, if you don't pay it off, those interest, and especially in credit cards, that interest can be pretty high. And obviously, some of the communities we talk to, things like payday loans are things that we at least want to plant the seed, because those are obviously very, very high interest and the wrong things. Credit cards and debit cards, once again, good thing to talk to your children about, because the reality is debit cards, children as the age of 11 can have access to a credit card, and statistically at 10.2 years old, that child will also have a smartphone. So they have access to money. And by the way, the cashless limit now is 45 pounds. So, 45 pounds for an 11-year-old is a lot of money. So the idea of credit card being pulling money from your bank account, credit card obviously being debt. Now the good thing is you have to be 18 to get a credit card, because obviously debt is dangerous in the wrong hands. And then trying to interject the idea that debit card works like an oyster. An oyster, for all intents and purposes, is a debit card. It pulls from your account. If you have money, you can go tap and off you go into the tube. But if you don't have the money, you can't go. Same thing with a debit card. If you don't have the money, you can't spend it. But we generally end the presentation, and this was a quick trot through, that money equals responsibility, and it will be with us and our children for the rest of our lives. And we reinforce the fact that it is so hard to make it, and it's so easy to spend it. We want to reinforce the 24-hour rule, and making the right choices, and the concept of trade-offs. The whole idea about debt, because if you start to look into the debt statistics in our country, especially around youth indebtedness, they are absolutely mind-boggling. And it is through starting to put, that the importance of being very responsible with things like debt early on is important, and encouraging them to, open up a savings account, and the fact that bank is a safe place to do. So I hope that, now I think what we like to do is open it up for questions. But to put this into context, once again, this is a presentation we give in class. Generally it's to year 6, 11, 12-year-olds. We've given it also to year 7 and year 8, obviously modified a little bit. We've actually given it to year 2, 3, and 4. So the themes are very relevant to all year groups. You just dial it up or dial it down. In fact, we've given a similar presentation at a university level and included some things for students that are more relevant. But interestingly, even at university, they also feel 50-50 that the bank is not a safe place. So we have an issue with a generation coming through.
Okay, Quentin, thank you very much.
Yeah.
On the question side, there's been a few coming in both offline and on the chat today. Maybe if we'll stick for the moment with some of the specific questions. You mentioned student loan, or students in going to university. One of the questions that came in specifically was, have you ever had some help for people who are planning to go to university, and how they plan for that? Has there been any specific work done on that?
We haven't. Our work primarily is around primary and secondary. When we work at secondary, we work primarily around, actually, let me stop the video so you can see me. We work around things like Dragon's Den, investment competitions, businesses, entrepreneurship. That's our focus. So we haven't done that, but we are collaborating with organizations like Into University So there are organizations that do that. It hasn't been our focus to date.
Okay. Oh, great. Thank you. So if I can take it right back to the start, you're a man from Miami originally, living in London. And what drove you to change the UK, financial education system from that perspective?
Well, I think hopefully I've got my honorary UK title because I got now my passport. So I've been in the UK 22 years. But the reality is, as a banker, and I was a banker for over 20 years, you sort of move shells from one place to another. I'm not sure that I created anything. And about 4 years ago, I just felt an incredible need to give back in the space that I understood, which was, finance. And I was invited to give a presentation in the school. I loved it. The children loved it. The school loved it. And I said, wow, this is very exciting. And so, one thing led to another thing, and that one school became 150 schools. So I do encourage people who want to do it, because there's nothing more intoxicating than going into your community and trying to make an impact and then seeing that impact. So I'm not sure I'm single-handedly going to change the UK educational system, but at least I contribute my small little element towards society.
And then one of the other questions that's come in was, what teacher buy-in did you get, and did you require ethics clearance?
That's a very good question. There's two elements to that question. The one is getting into schools, getting teacher buy-in, and then the second one is ethics. I'm not sure that ethics is something per se. We have our presentation on our website, and we tell the teachers to go look at the website so they know we're going to come and present. The fact that the book is now in all schools helps, because there's a physical copy there that they can use. So, but schools are very careful about what they let in, and the fact that we've done it so much and we come well recommended very often is helpful. Teacher buy-in, school buy-in is the hardest thing, because actually schools are overrun. I'm a vice chair of a primary school, and you cannot believe the demands on schools. It's not just education, it's society, it's nutrition, it's bullying, it's abuse, it's issues in the house. So the problem is the school curriculum and day is very full, and it's trying to find a slot for financial education. So I'm not competing against other financial education programs. I'm competing against flute practice or other things. So that is a hard bit. And I know it's not just us, but most charities doing things with school find it very difficult to get in there. And that's why we decided to do both a hard copy of the book as well as a digital version of the book.
Okay. One of the other questions that came in was, what were the big challenges you faced when lobbying for this? I mean, which bodies did you have to speak to and address? And I guess there are several.
Interestingly enough, you could just pitch up a shingle and do whatever you want. And I think that is one of the things that has been quite exciting, yet most frustrating about what we do is we're an independent organization. I self-finance everything we do. We're not associated with a bank. We're just a merry band of parents and finance professionals who wanted to do something. So the reality is this space is heavily dominated by financial institutions, banks, and the like. And while they put out some really, really good work, schools are very cautious about letting things that are branded in. So we're actually getting some traction because they like that we're not branded with anybody. The book itself has been peer reviewed. I collaborated with 12 leading educators. It's also been based on Young Money's they put out what's the year group needs to have. And it's been stamped and endorsed by the Department for Education. So the book and the materials that we have ourselves, we voluntarily went through that rigor because I needed it. And also we worked with Rising Stars, which is a leading educational publisher. So it has the branding, but the reality is you don't have to be accredited by anybody, actually, which is quite worrisome.
Yeah. And actually, what's actually involved in going through some of those accreditation processes?
It's unbelievably rigorous, actually. So I basically did the entire book on a PowerPoint presentation. I worked with a guy in Argentina who did the cartoons and we collaborated. Never actually met him, so it was this virtual thing. But you know, you need to put it through a lot of filters. And while I'm a finance professional, I'm not an educator. So I felt it very important that I worked with educators at all levels. And so we produced that. In the peer review, it goes through a variety of different other educating bodies, and they come back and give comments. And you need to integrate their comments. So it took about 5 months to go through that process.
And just remind me, how many books have you actually produced? How many public schools do you send it to?
So we send it to every single UK primary school, 21,000 schools in the UK. It also went to every primary school around the world that's based on the British system. So we've gotten some interesting hits in the website from, you know, Ghana and Nepal, and, you know, you can see where the British diaspora is. So British schools around there, they have these books. So yeah, so it went everywhere for free. And I think the free component is important because schools are very stretched in terms of finances.
Okay. And again, keeping with the material, obviously I know you're going to give the website and details and everything else, but maybe if you can talk a little bit what is available online for people if they want to help doing things over the holiday with their own kids and sharing with their friends. Maybe you can describe the list of things or the tools that are available.
So on our website, and there's a lot of websites, but on our website, we have the book. So you can download the book, print it out, share it with other people. In it, it has 12 homework assignments and 18 handouts. It's geared mostly primary, but it can be used for secondary. We also have PowerPoint presentations. The presentation I gave today is there, as well as speaker notes, other extension work. We also have videos, very short 2-minute videos. There's 6 of them. They make a good basis for discussion. You know, people say, well, do you have any suggestions for us to do, you know, either for younger children? And the reality is, so I made a list. And the first one is, you know, kids don't know what things cost. So one of the suggestions is go and have your child, especially if it's a young child, go and have them buy something. I mean, maybe not in Corona time, but go and have them buy something and look at the change, count the change. And then over time, get the change together and have them buy something with the change they've accumulated. You know, get that going. Go to the grocery store, have a list, have children figure out what things cost. They have absolutely no idea what bananas cost or bread. And have them then comparison shop. Very easy win. You can do that on holiday. Trade-offs. Every time they're going to do something, just say, you can spend 10 pounds on this or you can spend 10 pounds on that. What is it? What's your thought process on a trade-off? Going on holiday and planning the holiday trip. So if anybody's going away, to the extent you're able to, have the children plan that holiday from the minute you leave your house to getting there and coming back. Have them go to EasyJet websites, look on TripAdvisor, create budgets. So that is a lot of fun. Actually, schools have been using that quite a bit. The issue about climate change is what I mentioned. This is a great opportunity to weave it in. So you're saving on plastic bags at the supermarket, but have them saying, you know, sustainable fish, you know, fair trade items. 2 other things I would suggest. One is Warren Buffett has a very interesting quote, and that people come up to and said, how do I know if my kid is, what's the one measure that he's seen as to successful kids? And he said, the age at which the child first came up with, you know, started their own business. And I thought about that. I said, why is it? Because when you start your own business, it's an amalgam of many, many skills. So one of the things that we're encouraging a lot of children to do is when you go into a store, don't look at it as a store, look at it as a business. How do they make their money? What are they selling? Who are the customers? Are they profitable? Look at another business. How does British Airways make its money? How does, I don't know, Microsoft make its money? Very, very powerful, and especially for secondary school children, it's amazing what you come up with. And you know, watch Dragon's Den, a great, great show, because it's very engaging. And the last one I'll tell you, which has been incredibly powerful, is do an investment portfolio with your children and have a competition. Come up with a quantum of pretend money, £1,000. Come up with 4 stocks. Say it's a FTSE 100. Do a competition between yourselves, your children, and the winner gets 10 pounds, 20 pounds. Run it for 6 weeks. Buy and hold. Really very powerful because they start to engage with the stocks, the news, and the markets. And so those are things that for different age groups I would suggest, because that's what we do, and I'm always shocked by how kids engage.
Yeah, on that point, Quentin, I know you've actually taken that further with some other people. I mean, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the sort of next stage things you've done on that, and taking it beyond basic literacy, taking people into the sort of broader financial world.
Yeah, so we do work at secondary schools, and primarily around those two subjects about entrepreneurship and investment competitions. In fact, last year we ran an investment competition amongst 5 schools, 1,000 students, 14, 15-year-olds, very deprived communities. We gave them £1,000 per 10. They had to form teams of 4 or 5, and we say pick 4 stocks, FTSE 100 stocks, buy and hold, 2 that they knew, and 2 that they didn't know they had to research. And we ran it for 6 weeks. They competed against themselves, they competed against teachers, they competed against other schools, and they compete against other sponsors, including some quite renowned hedge funds. And it's amazing because they trounced some of the hedge funds. It's very funny. But the winners got a day work experience on a live trading floor. So 5 teams went each to 1 day on a trading floor, and that was life altering. In the sense, I don't want to make them traders, but all I want to do is I want them to expose them to things that they may not otherwise get. And we do work experience and apprenticeships and a whole bunch of different things, because actually corporate sponsors or just corporates want to be able to engage with schools, and so they're very willing to and generous with your time and programs like that.
Yeah, and did you find after that had happened that people from those schools or involved became more engaged?
Absolutely, because the reality is many corporates, especially now with ESG and CSR programs, they're very keen to have their employees engage from voluntary, and they're looking for any organizations that can provide voluntary opportunities for staff. And we can provide some. I mean, that's not our core competence, but so people are very excited, and financial literacy is one that permeates everything we do, and especially in the coastal towns. I tell you, one of the most deprived economies are the coastal towns, and London is overrun with good ideas. So are the major cities, but some of these coastal towns aren't, and so we have some partnerships with Plymouth and Bournemouth and some of these other places where they just love that people go and spend some time down there.
Okay, and I know you've already mentioned that the charity is well funded, but are there other ways people can get involved in the charity?
Yeah, as I said, for the most of what we do, I've self-financed, and actually it doesn't cost a lot to do what we do. But there's, I think, a variety of different ways. The first one is schools. So if anybody has their parents have children, especially in primary schools, I'll show you the book again. This book landed on the head teacher's desk in February, March. Please say to the head teacher, hey, did you get that book? If they didn't, or it got lost, or the dog ate it, please send me an email, and I will send you the book, and you can send it to the teacher. Encourage them to use it. So that's a very easy way. Encourage schools to use the materials we've sent. They're free. I can get them to you again. If you, as a parent, would like a hard copy, just send me an email. I'm happy to send you a hard copy as well. Collaboration. We're constantly looking for other kindred spirits or kindred, or like-minded, organizations in any form. So if you're part of one or know of another, please get in touch, because, we're not trying to do this all by ourselves. Webinars, we've now hosted quite a few of these for parents of different organizations. Have been quite powerful. Apprenticeship and work experience, we're always looking for organizations who might have some of those to provide. So send me an email. Policy, I'm desperate to make financial literacy feature more prominently. And so we're working hard, but it's a crowded space. So if you have an angle for policy, we'd love to chat. And any other ideas. I mean, this is not meant to be proprietary. I mean, I have one objective, and that's to make an impact in my community, to provide it for free. And any ideas that you might have are gratefully welcomed, and always love to collaborate.
Okay, that's clear. And I know we'll put up your contact details at the end for people if they want to contact any of these things. And again, one of the other questions that came in, it's an unusual name. So what drove the naming of the charity with City Pay It Forward?
It's interesting. So, my whole thing was, I find a lot of my contemporaries, guys in the 40s, 50s, actually want to do things in the city, but they don't quite know how, where do you start? I want to volunteer. Where can I go? And so my idea was, could I connect the city and partner with the education sector? So city is for the City of London, and pay it forward is at least it's very common in the United States, is, we've been beneficiary of a lot of things, and the way you do it is to pay to the next generation. So connecting the City of London with the educational space and paying it through to the next generation, which is, it's important to me, and I think it's important to the volunteers and my colleagues. So City Pay It Forward was a mouthful, but it was a combination of those two things.
Okay, and funnily enough, that links very nicely with one of the other questions, which is, to the extent, and I know obviously your specialization has been in the UK, but to the extent you've seen comparisons in the US, I mean, how do you think the two systems compare, UK versus US, for child financial literacy?
I think there's obviously a lot of commonalities. The big issue here is content, and once you have the content, you can sort of adjust it. In fact, as I said at the beginning, I'm in the States now, and I am exploring bringing this to the US, or seeing how we can do that. I've also been approached to do something in Canada and Australia. I've also been approached by another organization. There's a lot of schools in places like Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, some of those, and that requires a bigger change of the content, but the thesis is the same. So, but there's only 24 hours in a day, so we keep.
And you got the day job as well to do.
You have the day job, yes.
You mentioned obviously there was innovation in terms of the people that were doing it. Has there been other innovations? I mean, people were asking about YouTube and maybe videos that are maybe out there. Is there things you're thinking about there?
So there's two things. In terms, one of the things that's very exciting is we collaborate now with the London Stock Exchange. We partner with them. So if you go to their website, they are doing things for homeschooling and parents. The other thing that is very cool is Bank of England is connecting with Beano with some characters. And so they are updating their financial literacy for primary schools electronically using those characters. So it's very vibrant space right now. The other thing is, before, I don't think people would do Zoom videos like this, but we can now get into places where we couldn't do before. So I think digital is absolutely right. And in fact, I was going to start to put I was thinking about maybe doing weekly videos to try to get in there. So it's evolving very, very fast. And what I thought 2020 was going to be in January is not what 2020 is in July.
Okay, great. So in terms of pre-year 6, obviously, there's a few questions came here pre-year 6, and you said, you've adopted it and you've made it more easier for them, or more engaging for them. What have been the key things for the sort of two different age groups in terms of what's the differences to tweak? Is that
year 6 and below year 6, or year 6 and above year 6?
Yeah, so there was actually two separate questions. One was about how do you do it for secondary students, and the other one was for younger kids. And somebody's just come up and said their 3-year-old daughter loves Save Your Acorns book, and also suggesting you might want to connect with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so sort of the starting school age, and then the older, so the other quartiles.
So the reality is, primary, year 5, year 6, 5, 6, and 7, this all is very relevant as described. For younger kids, I do believe taking a look at money, buying things, taking a look at, the coin, the cat, the money that comes back, and the supermarket are really, really, really easy ways to engage younger kids. Remember, children that's by 7 are starting to develop their attitudes towards money. So you can't start, and that's year 2. So that's what would be my suggestion. But anything that links to taking a look at money and having some action is important. Above year 6 into secondary school, we try to weave these concepts into entrepreneurship and business, because we find that children engage very, very easily in that respect. So you start to weave in the concepts of how a business and the financial literacy around that. So there's various ways to do it. That's the way we've chosen to do it. It's around the investment competition and businesses.
Okay. One of the other questions was around the difference between independent schools and public sector schools. And did you distribute them to both? And I'd be interested if there was any difference in the adoption between both from my own perspective.
It is a big line of demarcation. My children have been fortunate enough to go to independent schools. At first, we were doing a lot of independent schools just because the take-up was easier to approach, and they were just eating our hands off when they said, yes, come in and present, and we love these materials. So in fact, we're probably going to be endorsed by one of the largest independent school organizations. So on the independent side, good take-up, good adoption. They've been actually using this and weaving it into home learning quite a bit, but they're not the right demographic in some respects. So we're focusing on the state schools. And we've had luck. We've gone through a variety of different things, like some academy chains like United Learning and Harris. So and yes, the book went to all independent schools. So every school, the 21,000 is public and private, if you like.
Okay, good. Okay, great. Just, I think, coming up to the end of the first line of questions. If anyone's got any more questions, please add them in. And then from earlier, so you put on that last slide what you thought the key things were, or what you remind kids to do afterwards. Are there any other things you think are very important? Sort of, if there's 2 or 3 mantras you have, is it the 24-hour rule, or are there other things as well?
Yeah, I think the 24-hour rule is a critical one. The second one is the concept of trade-offs. I think is very, very important because it just interjects an element of thinking about it, and the concept of saving early, because saving is a long game, and it takes a long time, especially with the low interest rates. It just takes a long time. So the concept that the good things in life take time, and as parents we know that's the hardest thing to do, but you got to start them on the journey somehow. And to be honest, I started the investment competition with my son, and he was 9, and he loves it to this day. So I don't think it's ever too young to interject the idea of businesses and stuff like that. So maybe not for all, but it was really very gripping for my son.
Yeah. And maybe the last question from me. You mentioned you were looking for help in policy. What are the biggest policy challenges when you're trying to implement that? Is it the access to people? Is it is it party lines? What's the biggest challenges?
Well, actually, MAPS, which is Money and Pension Services, which is the organization charged for financial inclusion in the country, has a challenge in the next 2 years, to bring an additional 2 million 9 to 18-year-olds into the financial system and educate them. I think when you're an independent organization and you don't have like a Barclays or an NatWest or Lloyd's calling card, sometimes they don't know what to do with you because you're outside the system. So I think our greatest frustration is, how do we get in to the system? Because what we're doing has impact, it has volume, it has national focus, but that's hard. So, we keep chipping away, but there's no one size fits all, because otherwise somebody else would have figured it out. But trying to be in the national dialogue, because when I say 15,000 kids, I'm talking about, we spent 1 hour with 15,000 kids. So we have a granular sense for what kids are thinking. And I think most organizations don't have that granular.
Yeah. And you said, so is there more than one body, or is it just that body you mentioned?
Well, there's Bank of England, there's MAPS, there's, we've been dealing with 4 MPs. We're probably going to go and have a chat with Sunak. So the reality is, I don't think there's not one body that does it. It is an amalgam, and in maybe some respects, maybe there's a problem, because there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and they all bring different perspectives and different objectives. So there's not one place that we have found.
Oh, great. Okay. Great. Well, thank you very, very much, Quentin. If there's no more questions, I was going to start bringing things to close, which we'll do within about 60 seconds of our projected time. So I think our timing has been absolutely spot on. On behalf of all the INSEAD alumni, both on just now and the ones that will be on the recording, a great big welcome and thank you from INSEAD Alumni Association for you doing this. Fantastic project. Amazing you've turned around in such a short time and had such a great effect. And I'm sure a lot of people will be afterwards looking for this over the summer holidays to help use their kids and hopefully share around with other people. Maybe at the end, just when we sign off, I mean, is there a way we can sort of have a way for people to contact you?
Yeah, so I'll put it, first of all, before I go off, thank you for your time and for the people listening, and I appreciate this. It's great to be able to have this forum, and please do get in touch. I'll put this page up, which has our details. That's my email, Quentin at CityPayForward. CityPayForward.com is the website. The more the merrier, and I appreciate your time. So that's all from me from Miami.
Yeah, well, Quentin, thank you again for from dialing in from which I guess you're kind of locked down now. Thank you also, as always, to Katie and Liz from the alumni office for making all the things operate smoothly in the background, and everybody for joining us today, and for those, as I said, later who will come on the recording. Quentin, thank you very much again. The best of luck with City Pay It Forward, and good night, everybody.
Thank you.